Eloisa had always known not to stray too far from her grandmother's house in the mountains of the Philippines, especially after dark. Her grandmother had whispered tales of the tikbalang, half horse, half human, a creature of terror with long, sinewy limbs, hollow eyes and a sly, wicked grin, that haunted the mountains at night, waiting for careless travelers who wandered too deep into its domain. Eloisa, though, had never believed in such tales. She laughed at the idea, calling them silly old myths, meant to keep children from wandering off. But that was before the night the tikbalang came for her. The air that evening was thick and humid, making it hard to breathe. Her grandmother had fallen asleep. So Eloisa decided to take a short walk down the mountain path, away from the cramped house. She wandered further than she intended, the faint glow of her flashlight bouncing off the dense jungle around her. As she rounded a corner, she felt a strange sensation wash over her, a prickling at the back of her neck. The night had gone unnaturally quiet, with no chirping of crickets, no rustling of leaves, only a low, almost imperceptible breathing that seemed to come from all around her. Eloisa turned, aiming her flashlight into the shadows. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing, but she could feel something. Someone watching her from the shadows. The hair on her arm stood up and her heart beat faster. Still, she shook her head, calling herself foolish, and turned to head back up the path. But when she turned, the path in front of her was gone. Instead, a strange, twisted road stretched ahead, lined with trees that seemed to loom closer and closer. She recognized nothing. She was lost. Panic surged through her, but Eloisa forced herself to take a deep breath. She turned and tried to retrace her steps, but the trail only seemed to twist more, pulling her deeper into the jungle. The breathing grew louder now, echoing through the trees, heavy and ragged, as though something huge and terrible was lurking just beyond her line of sight. She stopped in her tracks, swinging her flashlight wildly. And there it was. A figure standing in the shadows, barely visible between the trees. The figure was tall, impossibly tall, its long limbs stretching in unnatural angles, fingers curling in a slow, almost mocking wave. Eloisa's heart hammered as her light landed on its face, if you could call it a face at all. There was a muzzle where a nose should be, elongated like a horse's snout, with gleaming yellow eyes set deep in its head. A grin stretched across its face, revealing a row of jagged, sharp teeth. The tikbalang had found her. Frozen with terror, Eloisa could only stare as the creature took a step closer, its hooves crunching softly against the earth. The sound echoed like thunder in the silence. As it moved, it seemed to shimmer, blurring slightly, as though it were caught between worlds. It tilted its head, gazing down at her with an expression that was almost amused. A deep, guttural laugh rumbled from its throat, chilling her to the bone. She tried to scream, but her voice wouldn't come. The tikbalang took another step, its long, spindly fingers reaching out, close enough that she could see the cracked, dirty nails, smell the scent of decay clinging to it. And then it stopped, leaning down until its face was inches from hers, so close that she could feel its hot, foul breath against her cheek. It whispered in a voice like gravel scraping over stone. Eloisa's mind screamed, but her body remained frozen, trapped in the creature's gaze. The tikbalang straightened. Then, in a single swift movement, it turned and vanished into the trees, its laughter echoing through the jungle. And Suddenly, the path was back in front of her, the jungle no longer twisted and strange. With shaking legs, she ran, never daring to look back. She stumbled into her grandmother's house, her face pale, her body trembling. Her grandmother looked up, saw Eloise's expression, and nodded knowingly.
Once it marks you, child, it always comes back. You'll never know when, never know how. But it watches, always watches, waiting for the next time you're alone.
From that night on, Eloisa never left her house after dark. But sometimes she swore she could hear it, breathing just outside her window, its laughter drifting through the night air, always watching, always waiting for her. In the mist-shrouded village of Alder Hollow, whispers of the headless nun haunted the town like a lingering curse. Children grew up on terrifying tales of her roaming the outskirts in the dead of night, searching for vengeance, her habit still pristine, but her head gone. Some claimed they had seen her gliding through the fog, her ghostly form casting no shadow, and if you were too close, you'd hear the faint weeping of a woman betrayed. Among these villagers was a girl named Lena, a troubled teenager who never paid attention to the old superstitions. She had enough real problems to deal with. A broken home, a mother who had vanished without a trace years ago, and a life teetering on the edge of danger. Her new friend, Damien, a local gangster, offered her quick escapes from her harsh reality. Drugs, parties, and the illusion of safety. But Lena didn't know that Damien had a darker side, and tonight, that darkness would reveal itself. The night air was thick with humidity, and the village felt quieter than usual. Lena found herself alone with Damien in the abandoned churchyard. His face, once friendly, had twisted into something menacing.
I told you, Lena, you're not leaving until I get what I want.
Damien growled, his eyes gleaming under the pale moonlight. Fear gripped Lena as she realized her situation had spiraled out of control. She tried to pull away, but Damien's grip tightened around her arm like a vice. Suddenly the temperature dropped, and an eerie wind swept through the graveyard, rustling the leaves and shaking the old iron gates. The moonlight dimmed as if something was blocking its glow. A strange silence followed, so oppressive that it pressed against their ears like a scream waiting to erupt. Damien froze, his eyes widening in terror as something moved in the shadows beyond the graves. At first, it was nothing more than a flutter of movement, like a dark cloth blowing in the wind. But then, emerging from the thick fog, she appeared, the headless nun. Her habit billowed in the wind, and her body floated above the ground as if carried by invisible hands. Her missing head should have made her terrifyingly incomplete, but the sight of her was overwhelming. Though she had no eyes, it felt like her gaze pierced through them. Damien stumbled backward, his voice trembling.
What the hell? What is that thing?
Lena, her heart racing, stood frozen. There was no sound except for the soft swish of the nun's habit. The ghostly figure hovered, then turned towards Damien. He let out a strangled scream and ran into the darkness, leaving Lena alone in the nun's presence. Terrified, Lena fell to her knees.
Please, don't hurt me.
She whispered, unsure if the spirit could even hear her, but instead of approaching her menacingly, the nun reached out, her hand glowing faintly in the moonlight. A wave of calm washed over Lena, and the fear that had consumed her just moments before faded. The nun's ethereal hand, touched Lena's shoulder. And in that brief moment of contact, memories flooded Lena's mind. She saw flashes of a life long forgotten, a beautiful young woman dressed in a nun's habit, laughing in the fields with a kind-eyed man. That woman was the nun, but in life, she had been someone else. She had loved, and she had fallen pregnant. But the village had been cruel. Her devout family, horrified by the scandal, had taken matters into their own hands. They had murdered her in cold blood, hiding her shame under the guise of protecting their reputation. Lena gasped as the final memory clicked into place. The nun was her mother. The truth was unbearable. Her mother hadn't abandoned her as everyone believed. She had been taken from her life snuffed out by those who should have protected her. Tears welled in Lena's eyes as she whispered,
You are my mother, aren't you?
The nun's form shimmered, her body trembling as though acknowledging the truth. Lena felt an overwhelming sadness, but also an unshakable sense of peace. The headless nun had been wandering for years, looking for her lost daughter, searching for the chance to protect her from the dangers of the world, dangers like Damien. Lena wept, understanding now that the spirit hadn't come for vengeance, but for justice, and to keep her child safe. The nun's hand rested on Lena's shoulder a moment longer, before the ghostly figure began to fade into the fog. Just as the nun disappeared completely, a faint whisper drifted through the air, like a prayer carried on the wind. Lena stood alone in the churchyard, but no longer afraid. The legend of the headless nun had changed forever in her eyes. Now, it was no longer a tale of horror, but of a mother's eternal love. From that day on, the sightings of the headless nun ceased. But Lena knew whenever she walked through the village at night that her mother's spirit was still there, watching over her, her protector from beyond the grave. Deep in the heart of the North Sea, where waves break wild against rocky cliffs, local fishermen told stories of a dark creature beneath the waters, a mermaid. Not the enchanting, soft-voiced maidens of lullabies, but a vicious being of sharp scales, webbed claws, and teeth like splintered glass. They called her Shuguden, or the sea god, and believed that she commanded the water's worst tempers, dragging wayward sailors and daring travelers into the depths, never to return. One cold autumn, Eric, a young, reckless fisherman, was at sea just before midnight. Despite the warnings, he believed that the mermaid was a myth, no more than a fisherman's tale told to keep young hands in safe waters. Under a near full moon, Eric cast his nets, determined to catch a bounty. But instead of fish, he felt the weight of something massive in his net. He strained as he pulled, inch by inch, and as he neared the surface, a shock of silver shimmered. A pair of eyes gleamed in the murky darkness, and then the creature erupted from the water. Her scales glistened in a sickly shade of blue-green, her face neither human nor fish, but something in between, twisted into a sinister grin. In his moment of horror, Eric froze, unable to tear his gaze away. Her eyes, black as oil and bottomless as the ocean, seemed to fill his mind with fog. She leaned forward, crooning in a strange language, the words curling around him like an enchantment, thick as seaweed and heavy with a promise of oblivion. Eric tried to scream, but found his voice swallowed by the chill air. The mermaid raised one webbed, clawed hand and trailed her fingers down his cheek. Her touch was ice cold, and where her nails scraped, thin lines of blood bloomed. Then, with an unnatural strength, she yanked him from the boat and pulled him down into the pitch-black depths. As they descended, he caught glimpses of her lair, an underwater cave littered with bones and fragments of ships. Ghostly shapes drifted within, the remnants of sailors lost to the sea. They watched with hollow, lifeless eyes as Eric struggled, his lungs screaming for air, his vision dimming. In a final act of desperation, he clutched at the mermaid's throat, but she rose, a foggy, chilling sound as his movements slowed, his strength slipping away. Days later, Eric's boat washed ashore, empty and untouched save for one eerie detail. A necklace of bone hung neatly on the tiller. It was made from tiny human bones, strung together with strands of seaweed, and bearing a single seashell painted in blood-red streaks. The fishermen of the village knew at once what had happened. Shoguden had taken another, and every time the waves lapped against the shore, the sound echoed her cruel, haunting laughter. After Eric's disappearance, no one dared to go to sea on a full moon again. They knew she was watching, waiting for her next victim, deep beneath the waves, where the moonlight couldn't reach. And every so often, on foggy nights, those brave enough to stand by the shore swear they see a glimmer of scales in the water, a reminder that Shoguden remains, her hunger eternal, and her vengeance colder than the depths themselves. Every Halloween, the creeping coffin would appear at the edge of town, shrouded in mist, silent and waiting. It wasn't there by day, but as dusk settled and the thin veil between worlds began to peel away, people would begin to sense it, a heavy, unsettling presence, thick in the air. The first clue was always the sound, a faint scraping, like nails scratching against stone, drawing nearer with each passing second. No one knew where the coffin came from or who or what was inside. The only certainty was its silent, sinister procession down the empty streets, inching toward the house of its next chosen victim. It began years ago, when Old Man Riley, the cemetery keeper, disappeared without a trace. On the morning after Halloween, townsfolk found his house empty, his bed cold, but his footsteps leading out the door and into the mist. They followed the trail, which led them to an open grave with a single coffin inside. They said his eyes were wide open, face twisted in terror, clutching his own death certificate. There were no footprints leaving the grave, only ones leading to it. The next Halloween, the coffin returned, this time at the doorstep of the Peterson family. Young Lucy, who was just 7, claimed she heard whispers in the night, the same eerie scratching that grew louder until it stopped just outside her window. Her father found the coffin sitting on the lawn at dawn. But Lucy was nowhere to be found. All that remained was a single child-sized handprint pressed against the lid. Each year the coffin would reappear, scratching closer to a new doorstep. And each year another person would vanish. It became a kind of unspoken ritual. People would barricade themselves inside, locking doors and windows, praying not to hear the telltale sound. They burned sage, lined salt along every threshold, and hung protective charms. But the creeping coffin was relentless. No amount of ritual, no prayer could keep it away. Once the coffin chose its victim, it would not be stopped. This Halloween, as midnight approached, you can feel the presence thickening in the air. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle outside, makes your heart race. You hope, no, you beg that it has passed you by. But deep down, you sense that it's drawing near, inching ever closer, driven by something beyond mortal understanding. And then you hear it, A slow, dragging scrape, the scratching of nails, the faint rhythmic sound of something moving closer, closer. The creeping coffin is here, and this Halloween it's chosen you.